Patter, let's get at her. Yeah, we finally remembered that we actually have an intro to this show. When you compare it to last week, we actually have an intro. Thank you guys so much for hopping in with us. It is game week. It is the first game preview of the Manely Broncos podcast for 2024. We made it, ladies and gentlemen. We finally made it. Enough speculation about what happens in OTAs, what happens in rookie minicamps, what happens during draft time. It's where the rubber meets the road. We are finally at it where meaningful football will begin. The boys of fall are back, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to be an exciting time, and we are certainly looking forward to be bringing you the best Broncos content that we can. And make sure that if you guys are new listeners, new watchers of the Manely Broncos stream, make sure, of course, you hit the like button and subscribe to the MHRT Network page over there on YouTube. Make sure you also follow both Brandon and I over there on the socials. Brandon at Brandon Miller PO, at Cameron Parker PO.
Big Mark.
And
Sorry.
It's very important that we put this qualifier now, especially considering Brandon's a very famous person now in the social media circles. But
yes,
it's very appropriate that this is Brandon Miller, the Broncos fan, podcaster. Not Brandon Miller, the NBA player. So just
dude, I literally, that's why I made my account private, because I was so tired of people thinking that that's who I was. All the time. I'm like, look at my profile. Do I look like an NBA player? I literally had people tagging me, like yelling at me for why didn't you play better? I'm like, shut up. Anyway,
let's just say this. It's a bit more of an extreme version to what was going on, or less to a lesser extreme to what was going on with Brandon Marshall, the Broncos linebacker, and Brandon Marshall, the wide receiver, the former, Broncos.
At least that was an actual, athlete.
Right. There was actual credence to the fact that, it's at least understandable why, people would maybe get that mixed up. But no, Brandon Miller, the basketball player, and Brandon Miller, the Broncos fan / mainly Broncos co-host. Okay, come on now. So, but like we said, it's an exciting time. Fun to have all of you guys. The boys of fall are back, ladies and gentlemen. It's
if I really wanted to troll people, I could, but I think they would find out that I am white. This is just true.
Let's have respect my coast.
I'd find that in 4 minutes.
The part that did me was the hesitation.
I was like, this is the easiest way to go about it.
Yeah. Well, let's start first with the big news of the week, which I should say was quickly dissipated with a contract that got announced today. Pat Surtain agreed to a contract extension with the Denver Broncos as the highest paid corner. Certainly didn't
for about 2 days.
Didn't last long. Jalen Ramsey ended up getting paid by 1.1. Yeah, $100,000 more.
Dude, I think I literally already think in 2 days that deal is a steal.
It is, but it isn't. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's not cheap. It costs money, but
it is though.
Pat Surtain's better than Jalen Ramsey.
Yep. Yeah.
I said it. He's younger than Jalen Ramsey, and we're gonna have him under contract for much, much longer than Jalen Ramsey. I'm sure people know this if you follow the Broncos at all, but the Broncos got in front of this. He still has 2 years remaining on his current deal. I don't even know if that includes the 5th year option, but we have him until 2030.
Mm-hmm.
That's wild. Or maybe is it through 2030 or until 2030?
Through 2029 or something?
Let me double check this. I can confirm this.
but I mean, still, like you alluded to it, like the biggest the biggest victory of any of this from the from the Broncos side in the office side of things
through 2029. You're right.
Was that they got the two cornerstones of their franchise right now locked up, and
it was no drama, and I love it.
Yeah, well,
just nothing.
You could say that there was maybe some drama with PS2, right? With PS2, just in the sense that the moment Miners deal happened with Shadow Big Mike, I'm sure you spent a lot of some of that Miners fan money on Wingstop. By the way,
did you order the Big Mike? The Big Mike.
If he never orders the Big Mike special, at Wingstop, I have concerns. But I think as far as the drama I feel like was surrounding PS2 because of the fact that Miners had that deal, right? And so then it just became the created stuff of like, well, what are they going to do with PS2? Should they wait? So I mean, like,
sure.
And
well, let me rephrase. There was no drama in like the sense of PS2 being like, oh no, I want my money and holding out and doing all the stuff that players do.
Well, and no drama with the fact that he is going to be a Denver Bronco or not going to be a Denver Bronco, right? He was going to be signing this extension no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And I think
you get the chance to accumulate just life-changing wealth and like literally be the highest paid player at your position ever for 2 days. You take it.
Yeah. What and I think
I have to wonder, sorry, real quick, as long as we're talking about the for 2 days part, I have to wonder if the Jalen Ramsey like contract extension discussion had been going on for a little bit, and then they saw us give PS2 this contract, and then suddenly he's like, well, I want more than that. And so they had to come back and be like, shit. So 24.1 per year.
Yeah. I will let it look, and maybe I'm reading a little bit too much into things. He congratulated PS2 on social media.
He did. Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying it was bad. I just think it was like the timing was probably impacted that. Like, I just think it's funny from the Dolphins' perspective of like, well, they were probably thinking they were super close.
Yeah.
And maybe they were to like locking down that deal. And then like we beat them to it with a player who's like still under contract for 2 years.
Yeah.
And just like, oh, well, now we have to offer him more money. This is why you get deals done in advance. This is exactly why you do it.
What I'm trying to say is, in reading a little bit too much into it, I love the fact he congratulated PS2. It's just the tweet itself. I don't know. It was like he was jealous. Like he was a bit bittersweet with the fact that, especially kind of maybe looking back on it now and looking back on the fact that, PS2 got his deal and then, Jalen Ramsey gets it like immediately after. It kind of lends me to believe he was a bit bitter. You know what I mean? With the fact that he got his contract.
I mean, I'm sure he probably saw that and was like, no, I want more. But I mean, like, that's just kind of the nature of the position, to be honest. Like,
yeah,
like corners are very, very dramatic, with the exception of PS2. He's like the only one who's not, honestly.
I was going to say, aside from wide receivers being divas, the next closest position
is corner. Is the one who covers the wide receiver.
Is the one who covers the wide receiver. Before we jump into this game preview, let's jump into some of the extension candidates for the Broncos. And I think that this is, for possibly who's next. And I want to give a shout out to Jacob Romano of the Let's Talk Broncos.com and the Let's Talk Broncos, if you will, just network. He did an article that just dropped a couple minutes ago talking about extension candidates. And it seems very appropriate, obviously, with PS2 getting his deal. And also to the degree of, this was a very, very pro George Payton point with getting Quinn Miners and PS2 done. Well, for one, Payton was not going to let PS2 leave the building, and specifically, he's not going to let Quinn Miners leave the building given the fact that, those were two very, very good players that he was able to draft and, in the draft class. And so much too that he's already starting to, as much as we can talk about, the Broncos going forward into this new era of younger players, he still has a precedent, right? He has a precedent that he has been basically going forward with, right, Brandon, which is he's been able to show that we will lock up our players that are deserving of contract extensions. So he's at least shown that he's going to do that with guys like Justin Simmons. He did it with Courtland Sutton. He did it with Tim Patrick. He even did it with Shelby Harris before Shelby Harris was traded to the Seattle Seahawks. So, I mean, like, he at least shows the ability that we will reward you if you play really well, which is very much the case for Miners and PS2, the two cornerstones of your franchise now.
Yeah, and like a couple things that I take away from that is, like, one, we're basically the opposite of the Cowboys. Yeah. I mean, they pay their players, but it takes them so long, and they pay so much more money because it takes them so long.
It's almost
the opposite
like
of the Bengals.
They're the ultimate dude, by the way. They literally procrastinate till the very last minute, and then they get the deal done.
Yeah, but then they pay like 20% more than they were originally going to because they let like 4 other players get paid first. Anyway, but that is one thing too. I think building that reputation for this team is important in the sense of, like, I mean, okay, I do think people overblow the idea that, oh, well, who wants to come play for the Broncos in free agency because of the division they play in? I don't think that's as much of an issue as people maybe think it is. Not that it doesn't play into it at all, but, it's a professional sport. These guys are competitive. They want to beat the best. But I do think it helps knowing that you are going to a team that has a reputation of, like, hey, if you're good, we're going to pay you. You're not going into a situation like Dallas where it's like, oh, well, if you're good, you can hold out and we'll have like a lot of animosity and you'll miss time and you'll get fined and you'll have all this drama and you won't be able to be with the team. And then eventually we'll pay you, but like, it's going to be a process, right? Or the Bengals, where it's like the Jamar Chase situation as that's unfolding right now. Brandon Ayuk with 49ers, which was also resolved already, but just basically having the reputation of, like, just with players in free agency. And I know obviously they're coming over in free agency, they're going to get paid anyway, but just like knowing, hey, they will offer us they will offer you a fair deal. And even of like, hey, they come in on a couple years, like they know, and maybe even players that maybe are like emerging players that are kind of like not superstars yet, but they come in, they're like, hey, I have a chance to prove myself and I can earn a good paycheck. Like I can earn a high contract with this team. So I don't know. That's just something to me that I think is helpful. Not that it's like a major, it's not going to be like a deal breaker or like a thing that persuades free agents to come here, but I just think it's a good reputation to have. That's the bottom line.
And some other, notes, of course, before we dive into the extension candidates. They backloaded, it certainly appears they backloaded both PS2's deal and Quinn Miner's contract. So the Broncos are going to have a fair amount of money in 2025.
Oh, we're going to have so much money.
They're going to, I think they projected, kudos to Sayer Bettinger, who put this on Twitter. I think the Broncos are going to be having, and this is according to Spot Tracker over the cap, the Broncos are going to be having roughly $73 million in cap space. Certainly not the 100 that, maybe some like of us and, in terms of speculating, but, when you have $73 million plus the cash on top of it that we clearly have now, that Walmart money, as famously it's called, we will be, making priority for free agents and then, making some big signings that we need to make the team better. So, yeah. So this whole adage, as you and I have been talking about, Brandon, it's like the Broncos don't have money. Okay. Oh, they can't afford Pat Surtain after, spending money on Quinn Miners. It's time to put that to rest. The Broncos very clearly have cash. They're going to be having cap space next year. So, I mean, like, that narrative needs to die.
I haven't even seen that much recently. Has that still been a thing?
It is maybe a little bit more quiet than, John Elway is the general manager, but it's still out there.
Interesting. I think that's a big part too of like us being willing to eat the entire Russ contract in one on the books in one season, basically. Of like, hey, just get it over with. We're gonna have rookie quarterback. Like free this team up for the future. And I think these moves just continue to kind of support that strategy. And it's really all on Bo Nix at this point. Like if Bo Nix goes out there as a good rookie season, the sky's the limit because he's going to continue to get better, and we can go out there with a large amount of cap space in 2025 and continue to build around him.
Yeah, because the moment he hits and he has like let's just say a good rookie year, he hits. You go from we are rebuilding to please T Higgins come to Denver. Please, if you need a really good contract that you certainly want, we will pay it for you. And if you want to play with Bo Nix, please come to Denver. So and then at that point it becomes a very attractive destination for free agents.
Definitely. I have some interesting names to bring up in this extension discussion that you probably wouldn't originally think of.
Yeah. So, and again, shout out to Jacob Romano, who has this piece that just dropped. He had.
I'm not going to read it yet because I don't want to knowingly steal one.
Well, I was just.
I'll compare notes.
But I was just going to say, to do a little bit of a teaser for his piece. The players that he lists are very logical candidates. However, the one that is not listed is left tackle Garrett Bowles.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's like the low hanging fruit of this discussion, in my opinion. Like he's been the guy, like he's been that guy that we need to extend for a while now, but I just don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah. And I think that, the one thing that just has been always in the back of my mind has just been his ability of not wanting those restructures. Because especially too, like obviously the moment the Pat Surtain deal came through, we heard the news that it certainly seemed to me that Courtland Sutton had a second restructure of his deal. It certainly seems like that. Like there was a second restructure of the contract that he had done, right? So yeah, that, and then of course, the restructures of him not willing to do one multiple times, and specifically whenever you have a player that does a restructure, typically they more often than not will be a part of your roster. You know what I mean? So I just think that and then to respect my co-host's point, going back to last week that he mentioned when doing some of his deep dive, Sean Payton, I mean, when he went out and he named a captain last year, Garrett Bowles was not a captain. Mike McGlinchey was a captain. And then going forward with this year, Quinn Miners is a captain, not Garrett Bowles. And I think that, in what I've been able to kind of follow and with Garrett Bowles' career, he's never really been listed as a captain at all. So it's a very interesting thing overall just as far as just a talk. You could say it's a talking point, but it's just something that in the back of my mind that I've been just kind of looking at.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I'm honestly viewing Garrett Bowles as not long for this roster.
Which,
unfortunately, but that's just I think that's the way it's trending.
Anyway,
I think that's the way it's been trending.
So why don't you lead this off first? Why don't you go with some of the players that you think are extension candidates, and and I will say yes or no whether or not they're in that article.
I'm going to start with one that's just like kind of I'm struggling to find the term here. Not unknown, but just like something you maybe wouldn't think of. Jaquan McMillan. We gotta extend him yesterday.
Is he an exclusive rights free?
He's an exclusive rights free agent next year, so it's not like he's completely going to be a free agent. But I think he's already proven that he's earned the money. I don't think you're going to have to give him a gigantic contract. And I think he's also proven he's one of the better slot corners in the league and probably is just going to continue to get better. And he's a key piece in that secondary. I think he's a guy. I have another name too that's more dependent on his play this season.
He was not in that article, by the way, Jaquan.
Okay. Yeah, that was my sneaky hot pick. Is Jaquan McMillan. But that's who I'm saying is like, hey, I think we should probably give this guy some money. I mean, he's on a 3-year, $2.5 million contract. Like, that's such a bargain for what we're getting from him. Like, he's going to, like, he deserves more money, and I'd rather just lock him up now. Yeah. Because again, like, to have someone that is that skilled at that position on the field, he's only 24, is incredibly valuable. And I don't want to wait until we're getting through this exclusive rights thing, and then we have rights, but then someone else can offer, and then we can match. Like, just give him money.
I think to use a comparison, so like I think that like if the Broncos do agree to a contract extension with the guy like Jaquan McMillan, I think what it is like in baseball terms, it's like if you do a contract with, a player, you can do it so that they don't have to deal with arbitration. So it's basically like just a fresh contract. Mm-hmm. And I at least suspect that, like, let's just say they do agree to a contract extension with Jaquan, like, maybe upwards of, maybe 10, maybe 15 million a year or something like that, for a nickel corner. Right. I think what you'll probably want to see or probably see there is they're going to probably strip away his exclusive rights. So he won't be an exclusive rights free agent anymore. So that after that contract is up, that's when, he'll be able to hit free agency as an unrestricted free agent and, so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I just think he's earned it, and like, I'd rather have him for the long term, and I don't think it's going to cost you a ton of money. Like, he's earned more money. Like, we should pay him, but he's not going to be remotely close to what we just paid PS2, and he's an incredibly good corner. Like,
yeah,
lock him down.
Who else?
You start. I don't want to steal one of yours. You go for one. Just go back and forth.
I think although
if you steal mine, I'm going to be pissed.
I think certainly one. Well, I'll tell you what. I will actually do something different. I will go off of the players that Jacob listed on this piece, and then in terms of some of those players, and then we'll go from there. One player, and this was actually one that might actually fly under the radar to a certain degree, maybe like Jaquan McMillan. That is, of course, if you already had this guy, then we just know ball. That's basically what I'm just trying to say. Like, that just is what it is. Cody Barton. Barton. He had Cody Barton. I think Barton is a very interesting one. This is something that we've mentioned a few times on the show before. He finds himself a little bit in the Alex Singleton territory when Alex Singleton signed with the Broncos a couple years back. The only thing slightly that is a bit different to start the career as a Bronco was Singleton had a really rough preseason. Do you remember that? Like, Singleton had a really rough preseason. And then week one hit, and he was balling out the moment week one hit and really earned his contract. And I think what is so fun looking at Barton and Singleton is they both also kind of came from a special teams aspect of this. Like, they were really good special teams players. And then the moment that they were able to get more playing time, they were a tackling machine. And that's been the similarities between Singleton and Barton. They are tackling machines. So I think that if Barton, which I think it's projected to be Barton right now, at least according to the depth chart, like, it's projected to be Barton, opposite of Singleton. I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if, say, he does have a big year because of the fact he's shown when he was with Washington that, yeah, he may not necessarily be the best at times with run fits. He's still racking up tackles left and right. And then you factor in too, he's probably going to be one of their better coverage linebackers, between maybe he and Lavelle Bailey if Bailey gets promoted, from the practice squad. So I think it's going to be really interesting, there. So Barton, I think, depending on, that yin and yang with what we saw with Jewell and Singleton, if it hits, if that linebacker duo hits and they really feed off of each other quite well, he'll be a really nice, it'll be a really nice, I think, payday for him. Maybe not to the same level that Singleton did, right? I think it was, what was it, a 15-year? Like 3 years, 48 million or something like that. Or it was like almost like 10 to 15 million a year, or something like, or maybe I'm just thinking of something a little bit more than that. Maybe it was like, it was like 3 years for 24 million or something like that. It was like an 8-year per million or day. He definitely got a payday. So I think that Barton may not get to that level, but you could see him maybe with like a 3-year, maybe $20 million deal or something like that. So just something that still kind of keeps you, flexible within reason to do some more moves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely an interesting player I would not have thought of at all. I remember when we first signed him, there was like a lot of he's bad takes out there, but
Commanders fans
specifically. Yeah. But definitely an interesting name that I would not have picked, but another one of those like sort of under the radar, but probably also not going to cost us that much money to just have some extra, just have an extra guy in the room and see how he plays.
So what about some of the guys? Another.
I have another one. This one's a bit of a bigger name, and that's going to be Zach Allen. So Zach Allen, the main reason I'm picking him, we have him through next season. So like it's not like he's going to be a free agent soon, and then he has 3 void years on his contract, basically for like prorated signing bonuses and such. The reason I'm picking him is one, Zach Allen's been an incredible player for us in the like last year. He was amazing, and I think he's just only going to continue to show that he is going to be a building block of this defensive line. He's one of the most underrated defensive linemen in the NFL already, and him and John Franklin Myers are going to be a duo. The reason I'm picking him to kind of add on to that war chest in 2025 of being able to make some moves. The biggest issue with this current contract is next year he's going to have a $19 million cap hit, almost $20 million cap hit. If we can lock him up for a little bit longer, like he's a great player, we're going to need him. And we can maybe reduce that cap hit a little bit and have some more money available as well next year. But I just think Zach Allen deserves to have some additional money, but we also should keep him as long as we can, and also give us some more wiggle room and reduce that cap hit.
I at least respect the fact that your 2 extension candidates are people that at least have some extra years on them. It's not like the obvious, which is, players that this is the last end of the deal and they'll end up, a free agent in 2025. Zach Allen, for a void year, is going to end up being an unrestricted free agent in 2026. That's the way that it's currently constructed right now. So, I think that, specifically, especially when you look at Big Mike.
And I don't think we do this until the end of the season. Let me just put that out there. But yeah, Big Mike extend Quinn Miners again. Yeah.
But I just think that like for Zach Allen, like, here's a player where, JJ Watt was really taking him under his wing with Arizona, and he played with Vance Joseph, and I think that this is a player where, depending upon how well, he really takes that next step, right? Under Marcus Dixon, and dependent upon what happens with Vance Joseph long term with the Broncos as the defensive coordinator, from defensive coordinator to head coach. I'm very much looking forward to the development of Allen, because I think that we've been talking about Allen, right? At least we have, right, Brandon? We've been talking about him. but we still feel like John Franklin Myers is probably the best player on that defensive line. Still, though, I feel like Zach Allen nationally, even for Franklin Myers, kind of gets a bit swept under the rug a little bit, and then he's a bit.
Oh, he definitely does.
And so I think people really, basically, to use the comparison, John Franklin Myers, the real John Franklin Myers of this Denver Broncos team right now, based on how underrated he is Zach Allen actually right now. Zach Allen kind of finds himself in the exact same territory that JFM was with the New York Jets. He can rush the passer. He can be a really good run defender. He was maybe one of their better run defenders last year, maybe the best run defender last year. He's a stat patter. And I know that obviously that's got negative connotations to it, but like he really knows how to fill up a stat book as far as tackles for loss, QB hits, getting to the quarterback. Like he is a very versatile weapon with that regard. And I think that, you will even batted balls. Like he's a big component of batted passes. So I think that Allen is very much a big part of that defensive line. So let's just say Vance Joseph leaves a little bit. Do we take a step back with Zach Allen? Do we see a step back with Zach Allen? This is future talking. Do we see a little bit of a step back with him? Because I will say, like, let's just hypothetically say Jim Leonard takes over those reins. He still screams very much like a Leonard type of player. Especially when you look at what he was able to do, with Wisconsin, like he screams that kind of Wisconsin, do the dirty work type of player that Leonard has done a countless of good jobs with at Wisconsin as defensive coordinator.
Yeah. And Zach Allen was honestly even like that underrated when he was on the Cardinals. Like obviously JJ Watt was there last year, is getting all the attention, even though Zach Allen, or 2 years ago, Zach Allen's last year in Arizona, basically his best season of his career. You go back even to 2021, similar situation, Chandler Jones and even Marcus Golden, who led the team specifically in sacks, which like, obviously that's not everything, but when you're looking at pass rush and you're just like glancing at the game and even the casual fan watching, like you're going to remember the sacks, right? That's what sticks out to you the most. And obviously like, we're not talking about them being necessarily underrated or hidden from the coaching staff. Like they watched film on all these guys. There's a reason that we signed him, but he just seems to kind of have been the odd man out of like, who is this guy? And he just quietly had a pretty good season in 2021 as well. So he's kind of always been that underdog.
And not to mention too, we didn't even talk about the ironic part, given the fact that the Broncos are playing the Seahawks, which we'll get to the game preview here. Should they have kept Draymond Jones or should they, go after Zach Allen? Right. Mm-hmm. And I think it's pretty safe to say the Broncos actually made the right decision of, not holding on to Draymond Jones and going after Zach Allen.
And I love Draymond Jones, but I would agree.
You certainly wish that things would have been a bit different here with Draymond. But the way that Allen fits schematically with what they've been able to do here, it's been like a glove and everything that we would have, hoped for. And then some, if you will. One of the players, and keeping the theme of the defensive line, Brendan, I think that this is obviously one that is very obvious, and this is something that you and I have talked about before. What's up, Mark? Thanks for hopping in the chat. So I think that, for this one, I think that, like I said, this is a bit obvious, but I bring it up from the standpoint with this, Brandon, because like it's Jonathan. I'll lump them together: Jonathan Cooper and Baron Browning. I
almost mentioned Baron Browning instead of Zach Allen.
And the reason why I lump both together is something that I've mentioned to you, and I think I even mentioned it on the air before, or you even mentioned it too. Is like Jonah Ellis. It all is somewhat dependent upon Jonah Ellis for me with one of those guys, because if Ellis really performs at the projection that some of the people have been talking about, right? Like if he has a very solid year, he's going to end up forcing one of those players off the roster, and making him be expendable. If that's Jonathan Cooper, that's Jonathan Cooper. If that's Baron Browning, that's Baron Browning. So I think that, for Ellis, like he's a bit better than Browning in the sense that, like, he's got a little bit more array of moves to him, right? Something that we've said numerous times on the show. But, like, he can get to the quarterback. Like, he can, it's very evident that he can get to a quarterback. And even with what we were able to see with the preseason, Brendan, the competition, the level of competition based on, the second teamers, third teamers, what have you in the preseason, it was the moments that he was, creating that pressure, right, Brandon? Like the two moments where, funny enough, Keidron Smith was the one who, intercepted passes. He was the one who created the havoc of getting to the quarterback there and, and helped really create those turnovers. So you could say he was like the sole responsible person for, Keidron Smith getting those interceptions. So it's going to be a very interesting one for me to follow with both of them. But yeah, Jonathan Cooper and Baron Browning. Because I think that, comparison-wise, Brandon, I think your Trey Hendrickson of this pass rush room, to use that as a comparison, is actually either going to be Jonathan Cooper or it's going to end up being Jonah Ellis.
That's an interesting take. But I do think one of those guys is probably out after this year if Jonah Ellis continues to do what he's done in the preseason. And obviously that's a small sample size, but I'm excited to see Jonah Ellis, man. That's going to be fun.
Yeah.
That's it. We got some interesting picks here. I have one more that's also maybe one of those, I'm not going to say under the radar, but just an interesting name that is very dependent on also kind of performance this year. But that's going to be Javonte Williams. And I'm not a huge pay the running back guy. Like I'm not.
So Jonathan Cooper, Baron Browning, Javonte Williams, Cody Barton were all the ones that
Javonte is on that list.
Was one that Jacob has on that already.
Okay. Yeah. Javonte is my final guy. He's going to be an unrestricted free agent last year. This is his last remaining year on his rookie deal. And obviously he's coming back from that significant multiple ligament knee injury. But I think if we see the Javonte of old, then Javonte has looked, by all reports, very back to being healthy. We saw him look like that a little bit as well in the preseason and the few snaps that he played. But he is going to probably be the workhorse back on this team again. And if he can prove that he can do that at a high level, I think there's absolutely no reason to not bring him back. Like he obviously has that.
What would qualify as a good year for him to be brought back?
I mean, it depends on how you want to qualify workhorse running back. Like, is it that he has to have 300 touches? I don't know about that, but I mean, I think if you can lean on him in the running game to make it easier for Bo Nix, if you can use him maybe even a little bit in the passing game as a receiver out of the backfield, then obviously I know Jaleel McLaughlin's kind of going to be that more of that role, maybe even Blake Watson to some degree, which will be so much fun. But I think you can definitely still use Javonte in that way. I'm going to say, like, I don't know if he gets like, I don't even really care about yardage. If you can get him like 8 touchdowns, I'm happy with that. Get into the red zone, let him go to work with that contact balance and that strength that he has. Those are really his two biggest things. Vision has always been a little bit of an issue. He's not the fastest guy, but he just can run through guys. And where's a better place to do that than the red zone, a place that we've unfortunately struggled for a very long time. But I think if you can make it easier on Bo Nix to have someone who can kind of take that weight off of him a little bit in the red zone is going to be helpful. Obviously, we drafted Audric Estime. We'll see what he looks like. Is he going to be maybe a similar kind of bruiser? I don't know. He's also not the fastest dude, but he's huge. Is he going to be more of our blocking back? Potentially could be. Jaleel is going to be more of that. I don't want to say just like he's just there to spell Javonte, but he's going to be kind of the Darren Sproles role. That's a perfect comparison out of the backfield. Blake Watson to me is the
wild card
factor. He's the wild card. I don't know what that's going to be like if Blake Watson explodes too. Like I don't know. Maybe we don't bring back Javonte. I don't know. We'll see. But I think Javonte, you can absolutely keep him around for a little bit here and be like again. It depends on what he does this season if he shows these back from that knee injury, but I don't think you're going to have to pay him a ton of money either to keep him around. And as much as I'm not a pay the running back guy, like you're not going to he's not going to demand a huge contract.
Couple things. Mark from Georgia. I did not get the Knicks jersey. I did not get the ignore the thumbs up there. I did not get the Knicks jersey. I did it again. Ignore it. I did not get the Knicks jersey. I'm getting hacked right now. I did not get a Knicks jersey. I'm holding off on getting a Knicks jersey. I'm debating if I do. It might end up being the throwback uniform, and it might end up being, maybe the navy blue or the white uniform.
What are you wearing right now?
I'm wearing the Navy Vapor uniform of the Pat Surtain uniform that I actually will be wearing on game day.
I figured that was PS2.
Yeah. Also, we have Let's Talk Broncos Muse in the house. So first order of business, obviously, reveal yourself. I'm kidding. No, you're a fantastic account over there on Twitter. Make sure you follow the work that Let's Talk Broncos does. As we said, we just tabbed Jacob Romano's article there over on Let's Talk Broncos. So make sure you go you go check that out. Again, great stuff there for Let's Talk Broncos. They just did also the Let's Talk Buffs pod, where they previewed the game with Nebraska and CU, which I'm sure you and I will be briefly mentioning that near the end of the show. But great to have you, buddy. I think it's actually the first time I've seen you in the chat. So, I think for me, Brandon, with if he has 1,100 yards, and
you didn't get 1,100 yards.
No, I'm not saying. I'm just saying
all purpose.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying 1,100 rushing yard. I'm not saying he will or will not. But I'm just saying, like, from the re-signing, like from the actual re-signing aspect of it, like if we were to call it a guarantee at that point, I think that for me, if he has 1,100 yards and 6 to 8 touchdowns, I think it's pretty safe to say that he'll be back. I'm not going to be signing him to, some of those ridiculous contracts that, running backs have been handed out. Like, of course, the poster childs of this last offseason, Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry and everything. But, I just think that for me, I would be surprised. I think right now I would be surprised if Javonte is not back here, regardless of 1,100 yards.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I'm torn on paying running backs is, like, you can always draft one. But I think Javonte can be a special back if he can prove that he's back to form from that injury. And it's not been, it was multiple knee ligament injury, and it was like an ACL and a PCL and an MCL. I think it was all 3 of those.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't the injury that seems to be the death knell of running backs, which is the Achilles. So I think he can come back from that. I'm excited to see what he looks like this year. I think he's a fantastic running back. I think he was the best running back in that draft class, personally, or at least I thought that going into that class. I think I think Javonte will be back. That's my guess. But I do think that I also know that I would like him back.
This is code basically for my game day outfits. I mean, maybe not necessarily the Bo Nix, leg and arm sleeves, but that's basically code for, my amazing game day outfits, which I don't think I'll go to that extreme, for Sunday, when we watch the game together, Brandon. I don't know if I'll go to that extreme, but I'll probably at least have it on like the morning and then, before we leave and everything. So, yeah, should be fun. So yeah, I think it's going to be a fun one to follow, specifically with the, all these extension candidates and, and everything. But, all right, looks like we have a question from Spence before we dive into this game preview. It says, "Hey guys, the burning question for this first game is not the result, but will the MHRT neighborhood live stream return for this season? Need to advance order those Kona beers," which, by the way, Kona Big Wave, the beer is really good. I'm a huge Kona Big Wave fan. So I will definitely tell you, Spence, the neighborhood will be back. Bronco Bill will come back with his ridiculous takes every Sunday, his obnoxious takes that he has, even on Broncos Breakdown and, of course, the neighborhood. So they will be back for Sunday. And maybe, just maybe, I know that I've made some appearances on the neighborhood before. Maybe, just maybe, we can drag, Brandon's ugly face, to the stream for the neighborhood live stream or something.
Not this week. Not this week.
Certainly not this week for you and I.
But I'm definitely down.
Yeah. All right, so let's dive into this. Let's dive into the game preview, and then we'll give our predictions and everything, at the very end and everything. Just give your quick thoughts about the game right now.
It's one thing I have to talk about because it's kind of been, I've just seen it multiple times and it's kind of like bugging me. Have you seen that? I think it's like a boosted post, like an ad or something, basically saying like, "Oh, you should bet on Jackson Smith and Jigba because he's going up against Jaquan McMillan in this game."
Yeah.
All of those casuals that don't know how good Jaquan McMillan is, they're going to learn. They're about to learn on Sunday. But no, I'm excited for this game. Obviously, it's the season opener. I'm really interested to see how Bo Nix does because I think this is a very tough first game of your career in the NFL for Bo Nix. Not that he is inexperienced in situations like this, because at Oregon he has definitely been in situations like this with like a super rowdy, loud crowd, but it's going to be just a very tough place to play. And yeah, it's going to be a tough place to play. In Lillian, Washington. And a very tough defense with McDonald. So that's going to be what I am most nervous, but also low-key most excited to watch. Because if he does come out here and against that Mike McDonald defense has a great first game, woo boy, that's going to be green flag. But I do think it's going to be a test for him, to be honest. Like, it's not going to be an easy first game.
Yeah. Spence's final score 20, Seattle Seahawks 16, Kona Beers consumed 24. You forgot also hospitals visited 1. If you're consuming 24 beers, man, I'm kind of worried about you, buddy.
A little bit.
Yeah, just a little bit. Yeah, I just think that for me, I feel like the Bo Nix going into a really tough environment is a little bit overblown. Like, because like to what you say, like, I mean, it's like he, especially even going back to Auburn, like he went to Alabama, like he went to all these like, tough places to play, even when he was with the SEC. And we know that the SEC is the primo conference, like the best conference that's out there. And so it's like, And then you go forward with Oregon, where he furthered his career and he, furthered the snaps, where he ended up becoming a 35-year-old or whatever, the people joke about there on, social media. But like, I mean, he played Washington. Like, Washington was in his conference before both of those schools, moved over to the Big Ten. So he's not afraid of the moment. And actually, he had a very good game, in the game before, what was it, the game that Washington clinched to go to the playoffs. So it's like I just feel like it's a bit unknown. And then so much so that, like, I think that here's a side of it where, is it a lot to ask of for Bo Nix? Maybe, yeah. But I just think that from Nix's point of view, he could give some tips, some pointers when it comes to Ryan Grubb, right, Brandon? Because Ryan Grubb, the former offensive coordinator for Washington, moved over and is the offensive coordinator for the Seattle Seahawks. So if Bo Nix, is as smart as, everybody's clamoring him to be, and, so on and so forth, like, I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if, Nix has kind of poked his head a little bit into the defensive meeting rooms. It may be a little bit too much to ask for a rookie, but like, I'm sure there were some conversations, that were had about like, hey, what was this particular look? What was, these types of formations, or what were some of the big things from this Washington, offense that, kind of stood out to you? Yeah, you were looking from the sideline, but what were some things that, kind of stood out to you, when, in the games that you were able to play with Washington? So, I just think that, like, for all this stuff, I think that it's going to be a fascinating game. And I think that, again, like, I will say this. I love how the roles are reversed now, Brandon. A couple years ago, we had Nathaniel Hackett going into an environment where Pete Carroll, was the head coach, right? Going up against Nathaniel Hackett. Now you have Mike McDonald. The benefit to him is he's playing at home, but it's a rookie coach going up against a veteran coach now in Sean Payton. And
I mean, that's true.
And you have Sean Payton now going into the point where, he's seen everything. He's played at games in, the Seattle Stadium where the Sounders play, and maybe not gone and seen a Sounders game, but like, he's very familiar with, the very much of the environment there, especially coming from that conference, not the division, but that conference. And so I think that, he's well aware of the impact and the magnitude of what they're going into. So I just think that overall the environment point is sort of what I'm saying. The environment point is a bit overblown.
I mean, I do think it can be overblown. I'm just thinking more, it's his first NFL game.
No, I agree.
Like,
but
I don't know if I could have picked I could pick one worse stadium to play in than Lumen, and that's probably Arrowhead.
But I agree. I'm just saying that, like, when you kind of peel it back to a certain degree, it is kind of a bit overblown. But I just think that
I think it's overblown. I do think it's overblown. I think it's overblown for veterans. I'm just specifically coming at this from a rookie standpoint, but I understand, like, and respect your point as well.
Yeah.
Because I do think it's one of those things like, oh, well, it's a horrible environment, so he's going to play terrible. Like, these are professional athletes. Come on. But I just think in his first start.
And so peeling back the layer, and I like how Josh brought this in, because that's like maybe one of the two top keys, for the game that I've been, for in terms of watching for Sunday. And that is, I just have this feeling, and especially when you look at the landscape of all the quarterbacks that were drafted, there were only two quarterbacks. That were drafted that went to offensive-minded coaches. J.J. McCarthy went to Kevin O'Connell with the Minnesota Vikings, and every quarterback went to a defensive-minded coach or a special teams coach, right? And I think that for that point, when Nix has the ability to get the ball out quickly and he's able to process things quickly from some of the things that we were able to see, in the preseason, kind of. And funny enough, this has been a comparison for Bo Nix, and I don't hate it, but I think as far as the game plan for how they can be able to manage it, those quick completions, those quick completions that you're able to really neutralize a pass rush, I think is going to be a big deal. And I think that,
do you think that is going to be very helpful for sure? Yeah.
Yeah. So that is something I'm very much watching, because especially from McDonald's point of view, Brandon, he has so many exotic looks defensively, and maybe so much so kind of like, with Brian Flores and the amoeba style defense that he had, where they were all over the field, right? But like when you have those types of exotic looks,
yeah,
that's where I think it will be so beneficial for you to have a coach like Sean Payton, or just an offensive minded coach that can just be that cool head in your ear, or I should say the other cool head in your ear that just says, hey, it's okay.
Oh, absolutely. I do think that will certainly help. I just think it's going to be funny, because I think when we do that, there's going to be people after the game that come out and are like, oh, well, Bo Nix just checked down the whole game and can't throw downfield, and all the just stupid crap that you've already heard about him. I just think that's going to happen more. And like, they do it for like, it would have been done for, like, strategically. Like, I do think that is the best way to attack this defense and what he's going to be seeing. But yeah, I mean, I just think it's gonna be funny, because people are gonna come out of the woodwork and be like, oh, well, he didn't throw downfield, and I'm like, okay, but that was by design.
Yeah. Well, and specifically too, if what we've been hearing is that the offense that was ran in preseason, or for what we saw, was the Oregon offense, it would explain why Nix was just so comfortable and was able to get it like that, right out of the gate. So I think it'll be very beneficial. One other point that I'm sure that is even on your radar is the pass rush. And we talked about, some of those extension candidates with, Jonathan Cooper, Baron Browning, and of course, Joan Ellis wrapped into this. But they need to be able to, sack Geno Smith. They need to be able to get in his face and make him uncomfortable. He is a statue quarterback, right? Like, he is not a player that is going to be scrambling around, making plays, out of the pocket. He is a statue quarterback. He is a surgeon inside the pocket. If you're able to not get home, he's going to dissect you, like almost like it's a chemistry experiment. You know what I mean? Like a lab experiment. So I just think that for the Broncos, like, they need to get to him. And if they sack him, between 3 to 5 times, preferably 5 times, but if they're able to get to him, Brandon, it will be a very long day for Seattle.
I'm really excited to see this pass rush. Like, outside of Bo Nix, that might be the second thing that I'm most excited for. Yeah.
And actually, I think the bold prediction that I even made, and I know that Let's Talk Broncos Muse is in here, so he probably saw it. But on the stream for Let's Talk Broncos, I actually said I think that the Broncos will sack Geno Smith 5 times, because I think that the offensive line is it's better than it's certainly been in the past, but I think that it's a bit rough around the edges to a certain degree with some of those, players. I mean, they're getting better. They're also still some of those young tackles. And I think that for the way that we can be able to look at it in creating pressure, the thing that I think the Broncos have a better advantage of now going into this is they can be able to create it from the inside and outside now, specifically with guys like John Frankenmeyers, Zach. It'll help Zach Allen, as we mentioned earlier. and then you can get guys like Joan Ellis and, Nick Benito and the others. So I think for me, that might be, if you were to maybe tip the scales a little bit, that might be the edge, just overall, if you're, taking Knicks out of it, the number one takeaway, like they have to be able to get to Gino.
Absolutely. I think also PS2 is going to start earning that money real quick against probably DK Metcalf. And not that he can't, but
he had a good game against.
Good thing we have him.
And he had a really good game against DK the last time they were there. Yeah, DK kind of had his to a certain degree, but it's just like he was in his face the entire time. And I don't envision it changing much. You know what I mean, Brandon? Like I envision him following him the entire way. And so then that would lead us probably to another takeaway, right, Brandon? Like that would probably take us to, how well will, Levi Wallace do? How well will Riley Moss do? Are they going to mix and match a little bit as far as cornerback too? Obviously, Riley Moss is going to, be thrusted into a much bigger spotlight. Well, now this is week 1. Will that bigger spotlight consist of this week, or are we going to see a situation where, because as we said, it's going to end up being Pat Surtain on DK Metcalf. Is Levi Wallace going to be on Jackson Smith and Jigba? And then what are they going to have Riley Moss do? Is he going to trail Tyler Lockett for roughly the entire game, or will that end up being Jaquan McMillan? I think it's going to be very interesting with how because that's the other side of it too. Is I think that Jaquan McMillan is a much better player than he was when they played the Seattle Seahawks a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. So that you enter him to the equation, and McMillan is so a new addition to that secondary with Pat Surtain. So I'm very fascinated about that other side of the secondary side of this, because I think that on the surface and on the paper of it, I think that the wide receiver room isn't terrible. You know what I mean? Like, it isn't terrible. The question is just, how will the other guys outside of Metcalf do?
Yeah, I do think, speaking of Riley Moss, like he's going to, this is going to be the test for Riley. This is going to be a test for Riley Moss, in my opinion. I mean, I think you're going to try to put PS2 on DK Metcalf as much as you can, but I don't know if you always are going to be able to do that. And we'll see how much gas Tyler Lockett still has in the tank.
He's actually on the injury
that'll be interesting. Yeah, I don't know. Is it confirmed that he's actually playing?
I'm not sure, but I saw someone on Twitter popped it open that he was on the injury report. I want to say it was a thigh or something. So there is that chance that he might not play, which
I can't imagine him not playing in the season opener.
Yeah.
But yeah, it also was wild to see like the Broncos injury report of like literally no one. And
for straight days.
Yeah, and the Seahawks injury report is definitely not empty. Yeah, it was his thigh. Noah Fant, who remember him, is also actually on the injury report as a limited participant with a toe injury as well. But yeah, Noah Fant is going to have that another potential reunion, which will be interesting as well. Like that's going to be, I mean, as much as I think, honestly, also Draymond Jones is on the injury report actually for the Seahawks. But Noah Fant is going to be someone to watch too. Like, I don't think it's a stretch to say that he's never really panned out from what you expected from him coming out of Iowa as a first-round pick. Not that he's a bad tight end, but I just don't think he's been as good as you maybe anticipated that he probably would be. But I do think like they're probably going to try to go after him, like target him in terms of like Gino. So it'll be interesting to see for sure. Like I do think, I don't know who we're going to put on him, but I think this defense is going to have some challenges, but I also think like we have an amazing defense and we're going to prove it. But I do think it's going to be an interesting test on both the offense and the defense just to start the year.
Let me just say it this way. what is a certain matchup that maybe isn't really talked about that you are really kind of eyeballing yourself?
That's
And
literally whoever's on Tyler Lockett.
Who's ever on Tyler Lockett?
If he plays.
Mark from Georgia said that from what he heard, possibly through other outlets, is that Moss will be on Lockett if Lockett plays.
Right. Yeah, I mean, Moss in general is going to be the guy that I'm wanting to see how he plays. But definitely whoever is specifically on Lockett and just kind of what that looks like and how Lockett plays and if he has anything left in the tank. And if he does, then that might be a challenge because Tyler Lockett has been a great receiver for a lot of years, but he might be kind of over that peak.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he definitely is over the peak in terms of his career, but like, is he completely washed? I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll see.
I think for me, it's going to be about the offensive line also. Like, obviously, the short completions, as much as we talk about it from the pass rush point of view, it erases that. Well, it also helps out the offensive line. Well, I think that, it's going to be about the offensive line winning it in the trenches, because the Seahawks defensive line is pretty solid. I mean, they do have Draymond Jones there, as we said, earlier, but Leonard Williams is there. I think they have another guy there on that defensive front, but like it's a pretty stout, front. And Wosu's on the defensive line, and actually, I think he's out for the game. That's what was one of those reports was. I think he's out for the game. But like the defensive line, is going to be really good. The question, may just be a little bit maybe the front seven. So like the linebackers part, within that, how good would the linebackers be? But the defensive line in general, can the offensive line really win that side of it? Because I think that if they can be able to do that and create a lot of push and get to the second level, Javonte Williams and the rest of those running backs are going to have a really good day. You know what I mean? So I think that that is one of the other things that I am looking forward to. And then obviously, the big elephant in the room based on the last matchup that they had, Brandon, and that is convert in the red zone.
Mm-hmm.
Convert in the red zone. And when you convert in the red zone, limit those turnovers, right? I mean, they had 2 turnovers from Javonte Williams, and I guarantee you he's not sleeping right now, knowing the fact that he's got that Seattle game. But it was Melvin Gordon and it was Javonte Williams who both fumbled in that game in the red zone. And you and I both know that if they do not fumble the football there, in both of those instances, the Broncos win that football game.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably the other 2 areas that I am looking at is, the offensive line. Can they win in the trenches, along with maybe the defense and winning into the trenches, and obviously specifically the turnover battle. Can they be in the plus territory with turnovers? If they can do that, I think they have a pretty decent chance of winning the game.
Mm-hmm, definitely.
So then my question now, as we're wrapping things up, Brandon, do the Denver Broncos win this football game?
I'm going to say yes, but I'm going to say it's close, like 23-20.
I think that because of the fact that they have Sean Payton compared to the last matchup, I think it's going to be a Broncos victory, and they're just going to be very, very well coached, and then so much too. I would venture to guess they don't want to have the same thing happen again this last go around in week 1 where you were certainly efficient in scoring in basically every single possession that you had when you were facing the Raiders, but it's it was a very less efficient game, or it was a very less possession game, because I think it was like 6 possessions and 7 possessions each or something. Like, it was very small. Like, it was very small in terms of like the possessions that both the Broncos and the Raiders have. And if it's anything like that, it's going to be a very just a very interesting game. So I think that for the Broncos, like, they want to make sure they start fast. And I actually make a bold prediction that the Bo Nix will throw for roughly about 230, 240, but he will total 3 touchdowns with 0 interceptions. He actually has 0 interceptions on the day, or I should say 0 turnovers on the day. And one of those touchdowns will be rushing.
That'd be interesting for sure. Honestly, we're talking about what I'm looking for and what I'm excited about. In general, number one, I would probably say, will the real Sean Payton please stand up? Because you haven't seen it. You haven't seen it with Russell Wilson. He was not the quarterback that Sean Payton wanted. He was not the quarterback that Sean Payton needed. And I don't think we really saw the Sean Payton experience in Sean Payton offense, and we finally will. So I'm excited to see what that actually looks like, because I don't think we've seen it.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for hopping in. Hopefully the Broncos can come away with the victory. And if you guys are season ticket holders, both Brandon and I will be actually at the watch party that they will be doing on Sunday at Empower Field at Mile High. We're going with a group of people. So if you want to come and say hi to your favorite Denver Broncos podcast, the Manely Broncos Podcast, please do so. So both Brandon and I will be here, or be there, I should say. So come say hi, and make sure you follow both of us on socials, as we said on the top of the show, at Cameron Parker PO, at Brandon Miller PO. The show handle, of course, at Manely Broncos. It's going to be a lot of fun, and hopefully it's going to end up being a Broncos victory. Thank you to everybody that was in the chat. Let's Talk Broncos Muse. Absolutely love the work that you guys do for Let's Talk Broncos. Josh Sherman, Mark from Georgia, Big Mike, Respect My Co's. It was an absolute blast. I saw Virginia in the chat. Thank you so much for hopping in. It's going to be a fun season. It's going to be a fun. It's going to be a fun, good ride, I should say, this go around, because we believe, right, Brandon? We believe in these Denver Broncos. So hopefully the Broncos can come up with a victory, and we'll see you guys next week for another episode of the Manely Broncos Podcast.
Fast lane when I pass in the street, bag of money in the passenger seat. Simcoe's been asking for me on the road from the west to the east. Way up, I might never come down, cause the coast's racking up the flame out. So high, I might never come